permission to speak. Shadows hide you. I am listening. Our paths converge.
So good to see you.
Hail to you. Never lose hope.
Here, Fred Shadows.
I hear you. It has only begun. Fight on, Fred!
Welcome to episode 441 of Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Thursday, April 4th, 2024 in the evening. Coming to you from Nomergan, Ohio, it's me, Edelweiss. From Northern Massachusetts, we have Wicked Good.
Hi.
From Teldersill, California, we have Megasa.
Hello.
And from all around the world, we have you, dear listeners. As always, thank you for your reviews. If you would like to support the show but cannot do so monetarily, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast feed of choice. It always helps other people find the show. So, Life and Ladder. I finally went to the doctor.
Yay.
Yeah, and got prescribed like Mucinex, and I got, just in case, some nebulizer medication so that next time my inhaler fails me and like is not good enough, I at least have a next step besides just like, guess I can't breathe and going to urgent care. So hopefully I won't need that, but at least I have it if I do. And they took an x-ray to make sure I don't have pneumonia or something, which I don't think I do. I think I would not have good days if I had pneumonia. Whereas, like, distinctly, if I sleep better, I feel better. So,
Funny how that works.
Yeah, well, it's hit and miss with the kiddo and, other factors. But so on the whole, I would say I'm doing better. But yeah, it's just like, I feel like some kind of seal has been broken with my asthma that I'm just like nervous about it now all the time. But then in terms of ladder, I was feeling pretty down about things for a bit, even though I do like being able to hunt a particular deck. I just was not having as good fortune with the Rainbow Decay anymore. It just felt like people were playing a lot of different stuff. And so you could end up with matchups where you just got pretty screwed, and other ones that would just... Part of it, I think, was things were going very, very long, right? So if you have a series of long games where you then do not win in the end, it kind of sours you on on a deck for a bit.
Yeah.
And I decided, you know what? I'm going to try some of these other, maybe faster strategies, not aggro. I'm still not playing Demon Hunter. That's not how I function. But I tried the Nature Shaman. It's very cool. I dig it. Winning with Ragnaros is fun. And
this is the build with conductivity and Jive Insect.
Yes,
the deck.
But the other thing you can do with conductivity is you can go conductivity amphibious elixir when you have... So like you do the pop-up book, so you have enough minions. Conductivity amphibious elixir, you get 3 discovers. It's like a build your own reflexes, except it's not just nature spells. So sometimes you like actually find a Jive Insect that way, maybe another conductivity. Like, it's a lot harder for me to do on my iPad because the amount of actions you need to do with all these discovers, but it's very cool. And you can do things where you're like, okay, this isn't actually the pop-off turn where I kill them, but I discovered all these build-a-board spells from my elixirs, and now I can just like play Once Upon a Time? Is that what it's called?
Once Upon a Time is the one that summons all the different minion types.
Yeah, so there's that one, and there's Pack the House, right? So there's now 2 kind of big spells that are board in a box things. So that's kind of cool. Gives the deck some versatility. And then, of course, winning with 3 Ragnaros is pretty great. And then I still, I'm not amazing at those kinds of decks. But Jombre, being the homeboy that he is, just like created this incredible deck that was not the stealth rogue one with Celiax. No, this is Aviana and like Gaslight Gatekeeper and the Proto Drake that gives you a random dragon when you draw it. It's hilarious if you can just like you draw those and then you shuffle them in and you draw them again. Like you go from like no hand size to suddenly like a handful of cards that you then shuffle into your deck for a bunch of 1-cost legendaries. It's delightful. And Druid has this dragon that's a 4-mana 5/4 that deals 5 damage to something. And that's really good at killing 6/5s. So I just keep that against Demon Hunter and have been honestly usually home free. Like the amount of pressure that relieves when you just remove their 6/5 while developing a 5-attack minion, such that if they don't deal with it, it will clear the next 6/5, is pretty remarkable. So I had a lot of fun with that. You get some pretty wacky 1-cost legendaries. I killed a warrior with Odin. That was fun. The Odin only gave me 1 extra attack, but it was exact lethal.
And it only cost you 1 mana to play
exactly,
it. So.
Right?
Yeah.
So
It's a lot better than 9.
but the real crux of the deck is the 2-cost choose 1 spell where you can pick either big dragons or small dragons. And you pick small dragons, which I think is the short story side of the card, because Zarimi is a 5-cost dragon. And so I get Zarimi a lot in that deck between, that spell and the Proto Drakes every once in a while generate Zarimi. And I have not played a ton of games of Priest winning with Zarimi, but my goodness, the amount of times I have won with Zarimi and Druid is pretty surprising. And it's a very good Druid card.
Yeah.
You can go Nest Matron, and Fi, and you have spent no mana when you play Zarimi. The deck also runs the giants, the draw giant, right? The 20-cost one, since you're running Gatekeeper anyway. And that's been great. Also played some of the Shuffle Rogue. It feels like it has higher highs and lower lows, because when that deck gets rolling, you have like turn 4, turn 5, 3 8/8s, and it's filthy. But it feels like it maybe whiffs a little more, or I'm just worse at it. I don't know. But it seems a lot more susceptible to like, oh, well, they dealt with my stuff. Guess I'm done.
When you do the Gaslit Gatekeeper, by its very nature, you're hoping that you then draw into Everything Must Go or a giant, but you don't know whether, unless you're almost out of your deck, you don't know whether you're going to draw into that card, whether or not it was in your hand that you had before.
There are a lot of glass cannon decks in this meta, which I think is kind of the nature of a 4-set meta. And like, can you do the thing? If you get to do the thing and your opponent doesn't have an answer, then fine. I did have a game against that deck where they played the Ziliax and made it really big, and then I just played a Headless Horseman and then coined a Threads on my ghoul that was left over from like a Mining Casualties or something to kill off the Reborn one, and then they didn't want to play that game anymore. but yeah, if it does the thing, it's gonna win. But if it doesn't do the thing, it's it's got other options, but it's really all in on doing that. And if it doesn't do that, then it's gonna have a hard time. But yeah, I also have I've been also winning with Zarimi in every context except Constructed Priest. Like I also have been playing I started off the month, I got 11x. I didn't play a whole lot over the weekend. Constructed over the weekend just because like I was at like 2200. I saw there were 40,000 legends. I'm like, screw it. I'm just gonna chill. So I ended up starting out the month with Rainbow Mage, and then had my Sif double dirty ratted twice in 3 games, and decided that was not an experience that I was looking to sign myself up for anymore. And I played some of the Rainbow Mage, had the same experience, and then I found that I also found the Dragon Druid deck, but discovered today that I for some reason thought Zarimi cost 6. Maybe I just have already built in a nerf mentally. And so I was picking big dragons and like, this deck sucks. What are we doing? And then once Edel's like, no, you pick the small dragon. I was like, oh yeah, I'm an idiot. That's why it's not working. And then the deck worked a lot better. And
lots of the other 5 cost and below dragon hits
Oh, yeah, they're so good.
are also quite good. You can
Yeah.
get an extra Splish Splash Whelp, you can get an extra Spinetail Drake, you can get the Nest Matron,
Or gift
You
drop
can
whelp,
get
it's fine.
Gift
Yeah.
Wrap Whelp, draw 2 cards with the Paladin, Astral Dragon,
Yeah.
whatever it's called.
Yeah.
I think the worst one is the Paladin 2 cost, the Silver Wing, because no holy
Yeah.
spells, obviously, and we don't care
Or
about it.
Fairy Dragon's not great either. I mean, it's
Eh,
fine,
it's
but
fine.
but yeah. But I did have a game against, I went into a Highlander Warrior, and I, wasn't really finding anything, except they didn't find their Bran or their Reno either. And then I was on 10 mana, so I just said, screw it. Like, Aviana, Gatekeeper, let's go. And immediately drew 2 Hellias off the top.
Very nice, very nice.
I was surprised that they were still continuing to play the game because they hadn't actually broken their mouse after seeing those come down. And also I had a boom boss later on too, which was fun when I nearly drained my deck. So that was delightful. But while I was not playing Construction over the weekend, I said, oh, well, I've got a tavern ticket. Let me play some Arena. I haven't really played a whole lot of Arena since the set started. I had some quests I needed to clear, and it offered me Priest. So I'm like, okay, I get to play Priest for a little bit. So because I can't do that in Constructed right now. I mean, I could, but I'm not trying to play the Dragon Priest because I'm not smart enough for that deck. So I first pick, it offers me Zarimi. I'm like, okay, that's what we call in the business direction. So I just drafted like every dragon I could get my hands on, and just every board clear and whatever. Like I got a repackage, I got a Shadow Visions, I got a couple other things because it's outside of the new set. It's all like the curated cube thing. I had a game against a Demon Hunter that was going very poorly for me. And one of the things that I forget how I was discovering dragons, but I was, and I got a 1 Amalgam Band, and the 1 Amalgam Band, I because I've got mechs, I've got other minion types in there, so it had like 4 or 5. It rolled with Stealth and Wind Fury, and. And I had Zarimi in hand, so I'm like, okay, good luck. and I mean, in Arena, nobody's expecting you have Zarimi in your deck. Like, obviously, if you're seeing it in Constructed, you kind of know what's coming. In Arena, it's fair to not predict the Zarimi. And that 1 Amalgam Band, he soloed. He had an epic solo. We'll put it that way, because he just beat them down all by himself. and that was the end of that game. I went 10 wins in that run, and 2 of those games I lost. 2 of those 3 losses were because a Death Knight discovered the Scourge, which feels like it's a bit much to be in that pool. Like, I don't mind if you're gonna pick it as your first pick and then build around it, but when it got discovered more than once, I'm like, that's not great. But Arena was fun. I mean, it's a lot more fun when you're winning, and when you're Zarimiing people in Arena, it's a lot more fun. But I had a good time with it. So
yeah, I have also played a little bit. I've played with Zarimi both in Priest and in Druid. I missed out on 11x. I didn't realize that I was in 11x territory because I haven't really adjusted for the larger number of people in Legend in my head yet. So I was like, well, I'm not going to get it anyway, even though I was, in retrospect, in range. I'm just going to keep jamming Zarimi Priest while trying to watch a movie. Not a good idea. Drop my way into 10x, which, given that I was a little worried at the beginning of the month about whether I would even hit Legend because it took me until the day before the expansion, and then I always drop rank when a new expansion comes out in the next 2 weeks because I'm never just pick a good deck. I think one time in like the past 2 years have I ever just like picked a deck that was working for me in the first 2 weeks of an expansion and climbed with it. And that was Stormwind. Quest Mage. Before people realized to not play minions against it. I did very well.
Oh yeah.
So but I had fun at least with the priest. One thing that was a development like that I found out right after we recorded last week, you can add in that sort of those flex slots where people had put Shadow Ascendant or a lot of other things. You can put Glacial Shards. They're 1 mana, so they help with your drifters. They can get copied with your Pip. You can easily copy them with Celestial Projectionist or with Synchronize, and they freeze the Demon Hunter's face. And then you just keep freezing the Demon Hunter's face. You can't do it forever, but a 6/5 coming down on 6 is much less of a problem than a 6/5 coming down on 3 or 4. So this helps a lot. I wouldn't say it's my favorite matchup still to come in with Zarimi Priest, and there was still, sometimes you don't find the Glacial Shard, or you do find the Glacial Shard, but it's not quite enough to get you there because you're doing that instead of developing other tempo. So, but into pretty much everything else, it feels quite good, I would say. And one thing to know with it, you're not a clergy deck. You're not like hard mulling for clergy. If you have Funnel Cake, then definitely keep the clergy. But you're a scammy tempo deck. You want like Whelp Wrangler in your mulligan. And to have lots of those little 1/2 taunts are so annoying for most opponents. They really protect the rest of your minions quite well, actually. And they really help with your Drifter, and they really help with your Zarimi. So Whelp Wrangler is a really good thing that you're looking for. And in general, I had fun with that, but I also wanted to try other stuff. So I played some Hand Buff Paladin right after the patch with the Virus module, kind of like people have been doing with Rogue, and by people I mean John Bray and then people copying John Bray, where you have the Virus module, which is the one with Stealth and Reborn and Poisonous and Elusive, and then it has the double power. And in Rogue, you buff that with magnetic minions, and you stealth it with the spider, and that probably is the better way to go. But I was doing that in Paladin just with hand buffs, and then you drop it, and even when it's, most things can't deal with it. But the Paladin does have in some ways more ways than the Rogue to clear off the taunts if you've buffed your Tigress plushie and stuff like that. But wasn't doing great on that. Tried the Virus Rogue as well. It's kind of hilarious. It works more than it feels like it should for such a one-trick pony. Sometimes I would find I didn't quite have enough to clear out all their taunts in time, and also it's vulnerable to just getting run down. If you're facing that deck and you have a deck that can just do damage, like, you can race them. You can just kill them because they don't have a lot of survivability. I was seeing some versions of the deck today that were playing like stick up and more cards to help survive and remove things, but the version that I was playing was just like, I'm just doing my own thing. I can't do anything other than my own thing. So if you kill me first.
I wonder if this is a deck that should run Tarslick, right? The 1 mana, deal 1 damage, and stuff takes double damage this turn. Because then, you have an actual chance of clearing their stuff. And you kind of have the one game plan. So
yeah, that actually makes sense. It runs like Deafen and it runs Sap. But if they play like a Dragon Golem,
yeah.
If they're playing John Brays, then Dragon Druid, which is not the same one it's not the Reno one in the Vicious Syndicate report today. It's a duplicate deck. It's not a Reno deck, and it runs Dragon Golem and stuff like that. I did completely defeat a Virus Rogue with Dragon Golem today from the Druid side.
I mean, it's just, there's nothing to be done, right?
There's absolutely nothing. They did Fan of Knives, Concede.
Right? Whereas if they're like Tarslick, Fan of Knives, then your board's gone. So
then my board is gone, and I would absolutely have been dead because their Celiacs had like 100 attack, literally. Because I hadn't been able to clear, but I didn't need to. So I've been having fun with a lot of different things, and I've played a different game called Book of Hours, which is by the Sunless Sea person. He also did a game called Cultist Simulator, and it's this like, you are a librarian in this occult library, so there's all this lore, and you're trying to figure out how to craft the things you need and unlock the things that you need, and you're supposed to not look things up. So I am being very good and not looking things up, because I can see that the point is that you're trying to figure out how the mechanics work. And so if you know how all the mechanics work, then you... So that's been fun. But overall, I'm still, I know Demon Hunter can be a bit of a bummer and was a bit of a bummer when I was playing Remy Priest, but there are counters, there are things to do, and I'm still really enjoying this expansion overall.
Yeah. It occurs to me that specific combination in the Rogue, like that specific Ziliax, should be referred to as Shade of Ziliax Ramus.
Yeah. Yep. And that was a time running Shade of Nextramus and like questing adventure and the Rogue.
Oh, I really tried to make that work, but in not efficient ways. Back when I was just like, this is stealth, so I can like put all the buffs that I want on it. This is great. Very slowly.
Well, we got some news today that we've been waiting for a minute. So we should probably get into the news and talk about all of that.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
So we got the announcement for Battlegrounds Season 7, and Battlegrounds is not something that we typically talk about in depth on the show, but we do generally try to talk about it when a new season is released, and also when they announce that Duos is being released.
Yay!
So that is something that we've been waiting for since BlizzCon, and that is going to be part of the new season, which is going live on April 16th, which is a Tuesday. So we will be able to Duos on April 16th. This is going to be it's going to be a refresh, but there's not really a new mechanic for Battlegrounds aside from Duos. Duos is kind of the new mechanic, but it's really a separate game mode entirely. If you have not been listening to us since BlizzCon, or you missed that announcement there, it's a 2-player co-op mode where you can pass minions back and forth, and you can emote at each other to tell each other what to play. Passing a minion through the portal that connects the 2 players is costs you 1 gold, and then you have a shared life total but separate boards.
And the emotes that you do to tell each other, and you can very specifically target, it's not just like trying to interpret like, what does greetings mean I'm supposed to do here, but you can specifically highlight what you're interested in. There was also a huge minion refresh, which I don't know enough about Battlegrounds to be able to tell you too many details of, but that is it's the regular Battlegrounds doesn't have a new mechanic, but it is keeping tavern spells, and it has a huge refresh of minions, which should keep things, really shake up the meta in Battlegrounds as well.
Yeah, and we haven't seen all the new minions either. They just started revealing them today. They're going to be revealing them throughout the weekend. I don't think we're really necessarily qualified to talk about it, but they did mention a full rework for beasts in particular, among a couple of other fairly major shakeups for a couple other minion types. I should mention also, as far as how you're going to queue into Duos, there will be a switch on the Battlegrounds page. It's kind of like the switch that it's kind of like the way that you would change from standard to wild in Constructed. You can go from solo to Duos, and then once you're in Duos, you can either invite a friend to be your teammate, or you can just queue and then you'll be paired up with a random, which good luck. I don't know how well that's going to work, but I've done enough of the 2-player co-op tavern brawls to be very scared of queuing up with somebody random. But if that's something you want to do, then you do you.
Well, at least it's more MMR based, I would hope, than the random tavern brawls.
Yes, that is very true.
So I should be very scared with Duos.
Yes, you should. You just need to get your MMR. You need to take the next week and a half to get your MMR up, so you don't have to be as scared.
That's true. I have spring break, so I just need to.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. There are going to be 4 new heroes, 16 duo-specific minions, and 3 duo-specific tavern spells. We saw Cho'Gall at BlizzCon. Cho'Gall is a particular hero that both players on the team need to pick because they each get half of Cho'Gall's body and one of his heads. And they both have the same hero power, which is Double Trouble, which is a passive. Whenever you play a golden minion, both you and the other half of Cho'Gall get a triple reward. So you get to share that. If you're playing as Cho'Gall, there are other specific ones like Orchestra Conductor, which is battle cry, give a minion +2/+2, improve your team's future orchestra conductors. So yours or your teammates. But they did show us, so they showed us Trusty Pup, who is the best boy.
So cute.
1 mana, 1/3 beast. Whenever this takes damage, gain +1 attack permanently. There's a new dragon, 1000th Paper Drake, going on the origami theme from Whizbang's Workshop. Start a combat, give your leftmost dragon +1/+2 in Wind Fury. And prize promo Drake is start of combat, give your other dragons +3/+3, which I think that there was that's probably replacing something else that sounds similar to another name, but I just might be making it up. But yeah, so there's going to be 50 new minions, a dozen minions that are coming back, a couple new tavern spells, refreshes to dragons and mechs, a rework to beasts, and a bunch of balance changes, as one would expect with the new Battleground season. It's a big shakeup, especially one where we don't get a new mechanic. So they're more likely to shake up the minion pool because you don't have to learn a new mechanic and a new minion pool all at the same time. They will be revealed. The duo specific minions were revealed today on social media. The new minion reveals will be tomorrow, Friday, April 5th. Returning minions will be revealed on April 9th, which is Monday. We will get the patch notes on April 11th, and then there will be a grab a friend live stream preview event. This is effectively theory crafting for Battlegrounds, where content creators will be playing duos together. I do not expect that we will be participating in that unless one of you heard something that I didn't, but we're not really Battlegrounds streamers anyway, so that's fine. But there will be a lot of Battleground streamers who will be participating in that. That will be April 15th. APAC will be 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. Pacific, and NA, Latin America, and EMEA will be the same day, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific. There's also a refresh. There'll be new things that you can get off the track. That'll refresh with the new season as it normally does. There will be a new tavern pass. All the normal things that come around with the new Battleground season. So it's exciting though, but finally getting to play duos more without having to wait half an hour to 45 minutes in line for it is should be a fun time.
Yeah, my brother pretty much exclusively plays Battlegrounds when it comes to Hearthstone at this point, and being able to do duos with him will be a very good time.
Yeah, I am looking forward to this. I definitely found on the one hand, it adds another level of complexity because you're trying to think about also what does your opponent have and passing minions, but it was a whole different kind of strategy that I found really compelling, and so I'm looking forward to doing that, hopefully with people who know more about Battlegrounds than I do, so they can help me out. But also, with potentially a good friend of mine who plays Battlegrounds but hasn't played in a while, might bring her back into the fold a little bit. And yeah, just it was really fun to play at Battlegrounds, even to play me and my partner get completely demolished by Hell and Wicked. So if I had a good time losing horribly, you will have a good time with this mode too if you enjoy Battlegrounds.
You'll also be paired with people at your MMR as opposed to our MMR, right?
That's true.
Like you'll probably have a little bit easier time, and I would recommend you find somebody who you can do like a Discord screen share with to do that rather than trying to rely. I mean, the emotes are going to be good, but I don't know that I would want to rely on the emotes entirely to do this. I think that's just something where you want somebody, you want to be able to yell at somebody while you're playing it. Yeah. So,
Yeah. I'm sure the Discord server we have will be buzzing with, even though we're not primarily a Battlegrounds server. I'm sure there'll be ones that are even more happening on that. But
yeah. We do have a Battlegrounds channel. You can go find partners in there. I if there is enough activity, we will create some sort of a dedicated place to do that. So yeah, make sure to join discord.coinconcede.com. And, the second best time to join the Discord is now. So, so come join, and you should join there anyway. And if you want to play duos, there will be people to play with. I am very confident of that.
Yeah.
We also got a shop update, a fairly significant shop update again this week. We got a Diamond Inventor Boom bundle, again, $50 with the Inventor Boom and a random signature from Whizbang's Workshop and 10 packs for $50. I am not going to play the Econ bumper again because we talked about that at length with King Plush, but just know that it's there. Yeah. There's also the Rumble Signature bundle, which I will say did actually tempt me.
They're very good.
They're very, very good art. And if you are I played a lot of Night Elf. If you play Arena, Night Elf Huntress is an MVP.
Oh yeah.
So like that's also worth it. Like, but the art on these is very good. And you get, copies. You can get them a couple different ways. You can get one bundle that's just all of the Rumble signatures specifically for $60 USD or 6,000 runestones. Again, not cheap, but it's 7 signatures, so maybe that feels a little bit better. Though you're never getting any cards you didn't already have because they're in core, but still. You could also buy them independently, or at least the Nomelia. I don't know about the others. You can get just Nomelia for $50 USD or 5,000 runestones with 5 Whizbang packs. So, if you just want Nomelia, for Constructed, that might be the right way to go, potentially, if you're not going to play Arena, because the rest of them don't really see a lot of play in Constructed, but,
At least for now.
I mean...
At least for now.
I feel like Huntress has a shot, and, like, Warsong feels like it should have a place in some kind of hand buff deck. But... Yeah, maybe not.
You could also get bundles with Signature Phi, the Setting Sun, and Signature Mr. Mukla. There's a if you're trying to catch up on Showdown in the Badlands, there's a bundle with 1 legendary and 20 packs for $20 as well. There is a Happy Hazelbark Druid portrait. It is a lot less creepy than the original Hazelbark. So. Yeah. That's $10 USD or 1,000 runestones. And also, there were a number of returning portraits. So you can get the original Magni Bronzebeard, which was one of the very first alternate portraits for Warrior for 1,500 runestones. Or these prices are in euros. I would assume it's $15 USD.
1,500 gold. 1,500 gold or
1,500 gold or probably $10 USD then, yeah. Or you can get Torchbearer Tyrande, which is it's an upper tier pre-skin for 1,000 gold or $7 USD. Or you can get the best Demon Hunter skin, and it's not close, which is Emo Rockarana for 1,000 gold or $7 USD. And that, if you're going to play Demon Hunter, you will get a lot of use out of it, and Emo Rockarana is S tier as far as Demon Hunter portraits are concerned. It's not close.
It is quite
good. It is very good. And I also I had just been thinking that I was sad that I didn't have that Tyrande portrait. It had been in a bundle where it was the only one I wanted some time ago, so I didn't get it, but then I saw it come back around. I already had the Demon Hunter one, so it was just snap. Snap, get the Tyrande for me.
Oh yeah. While we're on the subject of whale things, I forgot to mention last week that I at one point told the crew here, hey, I did my dusting of all my extras that went to Wild, and I had 80,000 dust. So now, when I build a deck, I go over and I just look at what's not golden, and I go, hey, look, golden. So after a bunch of doing that, I'm now down to like the 30k dust range.
Oh, well, you're like that. Those are pauper levels. I mean,
I know, yeah. but also like having golden so many things, like I don't have to golden as many, right? So a lot more things I go to build it and I don't have to do that anymore because everything's already all golden. The exception being Druid. I have not done that to Druid decks. But
Out of
Why
principle.
why would you dignify them by making their cards golden?
I know. Yeah. I do have the signature Aviana though. Yeah, it's weird. I've never like thought of myself as the person who has all golden decks all the time. And it occurred to me that like next year there's going to be another great dusting. And
The great dusting, all caps.
I could have upwards of like 100k dust depending on
Oh my god.
like how things go. So yeah,
You got to be careful. Once you get to a certain point, you need to let Blizzard know before you press the button. You
well,
can break
but
the
I don't
servers.
press the button, right? It's I spend 3
Oh, that's true. You're doing it
4
one at a time.
hours
You're doing it
going
responsibly.
through
Yes.
just extras, right? And yeah, that took a long time.
It took me a long time, and I only ended up with like 30 or 40,000 dust, not 80,000. So
Yeah, I went a little hard on some of the bundles, the signature bundles, trying to get that Sif. Not all of us just opened the Sif casually as their expansion signature. So,
I mean, what good does it do me? It just gets dirty ratted. What's the point of even having it in having the signature?
you don't need it to win. The deck can win other ways.
Yeah, I know, but if I'm going to put in if I'm going to go to the trouble of putting in the signature Sif, I want to use it.
I mean, really, it's about the fact that there aren't other arts of Sif, right?
Yeah.
There is one. It's the signature, and the others don't exist because they are
Not good.
Not good.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, see, that's the thing, right? When I do the great dusting for next year, I have a regular and a golden Sif that are going to get dusted. They're just sitting there right now in case they ever nerf Sif.
Which is possible, actually.
It's
Hopefully
theoretically
not, but
possible.
it
It's
is
been long
theoretically
enough at this
possible.
point that I don't think they'll do it. But yeah, this is for those that are unfamiliar with this whaliest of systems. Basically, you never hit the button because there's a chance that they will nerf something that you have a bunch of extras for, and then when that happens, you dust them for the full dust refund. So I just never hit the button, keep extras of everything so that, when they say nerf wild seeds, I go and like dust all the wild seed things. And so even if I keep a couple to still play with, right, you get the extra dust. So yeah.
This is the rich get richer dusting
most
system.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is something that I only started doing recently. There are definitely people who will say you have to do it this way. And if you have enough dust to begin with, then yes, it is optimal in that it does get you the most dust eventually. But it gives you no liquid dust until a rotation.
Yeah, if you are like, scraping to put decks together, then I would say it's not the best system because like you need that now to build what you want to build. Yeah. But I already can build everything I want to build. So,
but if you have the means,
yeah, no, I am the 1% of Hearthstone for sure.
So one last thing before we go on to tournament news, because we actually have substantial tournament news to discuss. We didn't mention last week that the Whizbang's workshop event started. There was an issue where the first quest, and sometimes the only quest, depending on what you're playing, the first quest that you would see that you can't reroll is play or destroy Joymancer Geppetto, and the or destroy part was not working, so you had to own the card in order to do it. They have fixed that. Even so, you need to find somebody else who is playing Joymancer Geppetto, which good luck. So that's still I still have that up. I have not completed that one. This is the slowest event that I have ever progress through. I think also they changed it to a flat number of gems or whatever it is at the end of each match. I think it's just like 10 flat gems, regardless of how long the game went. So it's been pretty much a slog for me, but I'll get through it eventually. But one day somebody will play Geppetto in some context, and I will move past that quest.
We could play a game, Wicked. We
could
could make this happen.
Yeah.
Friend
Yeah.
his work.
I suppose, yes, that is one way to get through it. Though now it's kind of a badge of honor, so.
Like how I re-roll the challenge a friend quest. Because I'm just too lazy.
Wow. I've had one. Actually, Maureen and I have both had one up a piece since before the expansion dropped, and we have not yet used them because we've just been too tired.
I do feel if you do get past the Geppetto one, the rest of them are pretty easy to do. The fact that the first one involves a legendary that was not free, you got it if you bought the Tavern Pass, but obviously that's not free. So that, I think, people have not been pleased with. And I did somehow destroy a Geppetto, but that was pretty random that someone played it. And then I forgot that I even needed to, and then I happened to kill it instead of ignore it, which was not even on purpose. And then it was cleared, and I'm like, oh. But that's not going to be most people's experience with it. And I think, hopefully, something like this, I think, would make more sense if it was the last one in the chain. Yeah. Having it be the first one feels pretty bad.
Or if it was launched on the day of the expansion when everybody's trying stuff, right? You can do that on if you were to launch the event on day one of the expansion, then people are trying things. You would probably see one of everything, and you would have an opportunity to clear that quest. The problem is that this event starts 10 to 14 days after the set launches. So the meta settled. And if that card isn't in the meta, not every card's going to be in the meta. I mean, there's a balance change that's based on minimal data. That's not necessarily going to push things into the meta by itself, especially if they're not buffing anything. So once the meta is settled, then you're kind of relying on either you playing it yourself, which means you own it, or you're planning on going into casual or something and trying to run into somebody who happens to be playing it. It's a little bit of a bummer. I'm sure that they'll take some lessons from this and figure that out for next time. But it was kind of exacerbated by the fact that you couldn't destroy somebody else's, so you could only do it if you played your own. But
yeah, I mean, I imagine the thinking was just straight up, oh hey, this is the legendary that's the first one on the rewards track.
Yeah,
we'll make it the first thing in the quest, right?
Except it's the first one on the Tavern Pass rewards track.
Yeah.
Not
that's
the regular.
What I mean.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
I know.
Pay to win.
There's a clear causality there, right?
Yeah. There's an easy way to get this legendary if you just get the Tavern Pass. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of things that released a little bit after the expansion, let's talk about tournaments.
It's the Grand Tournament!
So we have Masters Tour. I guess they don't have names anymore. April.
Spring 2024, I guess.
Yeah, spring, and then we skip another season, and then it's winter, right? I think that's the way it's going to go.
Spring Championship. Hearthstone Masters Tour Spring Championship is what's in the graphic. So
yeah, it's going to be spring and winter, and fall doesn't exist anymore. So that is going to be April 12th to 14th. We're getting 3 broadcast days again, which was basically a consolation of it's going to be one fewer Masters Tour, but we're going to make them 3 days. So that is nice, because then we can feature as many players as possible and really give them the time that they deserve for doing a heck of a grind to get there. So we have, from our beloved world champion Pocket Train, an unofficial Masters Tour groups, because no information ever. And this is predicted based on how they seeded the 2023 Masters Tours. So if this is going to manifest, we don't know. But Group A would be Wikyu versus Yarla. This has no vowels, but Prithinka versus Gyu. Group B would be Molestar versus Gamer RVG, which is a little unfortunate because they're two American players, but Molestar is a teammate of mine, so I just have to shout that out. Let's go Swogoy. But and then Rekvem versus something Korean that I can't read Korean, unfortunately. So hopefully I'll get a pronunciation guide on that if I'm going to be casting that. So Group C is MMF versus Insane and Fury Hunter versus Tobika. And then Group D is Dmitry Kazov versus Bunny Hopper. Man, Dmitry Kazov, that's a throwback. And then Habu Gabu versus Hemlock. So pretty incredible group, honestly. I do wonder if some of these just like accidentally got in because I don't know how hard Bunny was trying. Right?
He wasn't. He explicitly said he wasn't, and he only played like a couple hundred games, but his MMR was so good that he was able to qualify regardless. Because I believe he said on Twitter, I don't have the exact tweet in front of me, that he was intentionally not try-harding. Like he was
playing
at that MMR, but he wasn't trying to get a finish, but he just, he's Bunny Hopper. So he did, but already his MMR was so good already going into those 2 seasons that he was just able to maintain. And so that he was able to finish where he finished. And Habu Gabu just went 75 and 25 on rank 1 with Handbuff Paladin. And that's good enough, right?
What a monster. I mean, yeah, it's, whew. I mean, I almost wonder if Habu Gabu was just like, this is a low stress deck. I could just run this one.
Yeah.
We could just do it now. Just skyrocket my MMR so that no one can catch me. And then, we chill once balance hits.
Just Habu Gabu things, that's all it is.
So, should be pretty amazing. Would love it if Bunny Hopper went through. I don't know that we've ever had a like 2-time world champion.
We haven't.
So, not sure Bunny's, being already qualified, I know he's going to do his best, but, this might be it in terms of making it or not, because he's not going to necessarily be intentionally grinding for the next one.
I'm really looking forward to having more days to watch, and I always find the tournaments really informative, really entertaining. It's really nice to, I find them even more compelling than regular streams because you're seeing both sides of the game. You have casters who are just there to talk about the game and not also trying to play the game at the same time. So I'm really, as always, looking forward to it. I'm probably going to end up having to watch some VODs because I am going to be out of town that weekend, but I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah. And I think the only what's problematic about this is the short notice for not just for us as viewers, but also for everyone involved, including the competitors. Like everyone found out on Tuesday. We found out as a general public, the players found out on Tuesday, that they were going to have to block off the following weekend. And like, I can't even imagine. I mean, playing for 2 months without knowing when this was going to be, and also like just the whole point of this restructured process, right, with 2 months on and then 2 months off, is to give the competitors a break. So I can only imagine having just ground through March, right? April 1st is a Monday. Thank God they didn't announce this on Monday. Could you imagine if we announced this on April Fool's? Like, holy crap. But so they announced this on Tuesday, and it's like, oh, okay, lineup prep starts right now, because they're going to need that time in order to be able to figure out a lineup, figure out what the other, just figure out who the other people are, what they're likely to play, and then start testing decks for a lineup. They're not getting a break, right? They got a day, effectively, then maybe a day and a half to rest, and now it's right back to it because they need to grind through and figure out lineups and get, cobble together. I mean, I'm sure that it's not hard to get a practice group together, but those things do take a little bit of time and effort to put together, and just like not having any sort of advance notice, just especially given how much we're asking of the players to do now, right? Like if you're asking the players, I mean, bunny hopper aside, you're asking the players to grind for hundreds of hours through over the course of 2 months just to be able to just have a chance of qualifying. Like, let's give them a little bit of, predictability there. Like, I don't think we need to add this onto the stress of what's already a stressful system in order to qualify in. So hopefully this is a one-time thing. Hopefully this is some sort of a transition that got lost in the shuffle. Given the problems that we had last year, I don't have a lot of confidence that it's going to be a one-time thing. I would like to think that it is, or that something's going to improve there. But anyway, hopefully this will get a little bit smoother, but it didn't get smoother after last year, and it just seems like even a step backward from that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand how it can be this much of a problem to pick a date.
Yeah.
Like,
there's no venue.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Riot picks their dates and stuff like 2 years in advance.
Yeah.
Like, different company, different level of esports and things. But I don't know. This isn't even 2 weeks notice. Like, it would be expected that if I were quitting a job somewhere, I would tell people with more notice than this. Like, I feel like you can give folks, at least more than 2 weeks. Rachel's going to be on call that weekend, so that's going to be fun. But it's just like, it makes it so that the only people that could really do this kind of stuff are the ones who can open up their schedule, right? Because I mean, imagine you did all that to qualify, and you're like, I'm not available that weekend, right? Like,
or you have to work Friday,
yeah,
right? You have a job where you have to work on the Friday, right? Like,
yeah, it's just really disrespectful. I don't know how else to put it, but yeah, it par for the course at this point. We had hoped that maybe things might change under Microsoft. So far, no.
Yeah,
the lowest of expectations at this point, and we just have to hope maybe something will be better. But in terms of tournaments, we also have a community tournament that Feno is going to be putting on this weekend. So that is going to be a 64-player bracket in both NA and EU. And he's been trying to put together folks to be able to stream it. And I don't know if he's exactly going to have casting, but I think he is going to comment over the event. So, it's nice to see players doing these community events now.
Yeah.
Just because I think the system of like qualifiers every weekend just completely sapped away all opportunities for people to do third-party stuff. And so, for better or for worse, one advantage to a hollowed out esports system is that community can start throwing events again, because it's likely not going to interfere with anything that the main circuit's doing.
Yeah, I mean, may Bebby rest in peace. They would have loved having this wide open space here that, to be able to run these types of things. But and I mean, ultimately, you kind of need to be a large streamer with a large community to be able to pull anything like this off now, because there's no sponsorship, right? Sure. Like the sponsorship stuff has dried up too. So you're somebody who's going to be able to provide, prizing. Blizzard, I presumably Blizzard's kicking in some of the packs for some of the prizing for the community stuff, but like you need to be a streamer who's large enough to be able to run something like this in order to be able to even pull off an event like this, and I'm glad the Feno is. I mean, there is definitely a gap there for competitive play. I mean, THL exists. I will say that every time that this comes up. Like, Team Hearth League is certainly a thing that, it still continues to run every expansion and is a growing community. But, having like anything approaching a LAN, and I know that this is not a LAN, this is an online event, but anything just approaching like a 2-day event with casting, like, we need more of that, and wherever we can get it is a good thing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But that's going to do it for tournaments. So we actually have an evergreen Decksplanations for this week, and it's about finding, choosing, and adapting sort of main deck to use to climb. So yeah, take us away.
All right. Well, we thought it would been a while since we've done really an evergreen topic, and since we've done this particular type of topic, and it's something that we all do, and Edel often builds her own, but look around, try to find decks, try to choose things that will work well with their play style, and then think about what are the card choices that you want to make with a deck that you have. Even if you are net decking, you're not there's going to be different versions, and you're not necessarily just copy pasting a 30 cards, or you might play some and then tweak. And thought we could talk about how do we go about all steps of that process. And I thought we would just start with, there is a balance to be struck between finding kind of a main deck to jam and climb with, really learn well, with bouncing around to different decks. Obviously, this partly depends on whether you are crafting things with a limited amount of dust or not. So we do have a little bit of a privilege of being whales enough that we just kind of craft whatever we want whenever we want it. But assuming that you are able to play multiple things, I think there's pros and cons, right, of sticking to a deck. Some of the pros of sticking to a single deck, certainly in my own experience, on times when I have really learned one deck well, that is when I really hit top legend. That is when I really had my best results and was able to learn how to play at a somewhat deeper strategic level, because I could move beyond how does this deck work, how does it fit into the meta, and really get into the nitty gritty. That actually, I think, does carry over to my being able to play any sort of fast priest deck or just certain type of proactive board deck. When I pick up Zarimi Priest, I'm much quicker to figure out what's going on with it than someone who didn't play 1,000 games of Naga Priest and Shadow Undead Priest. And obviously, if you just pick one deck, you're not having to craft multiple decks if that's an issue for you. But since I got on the podcast, I've been bouncing around more, and my MMR has suffered, but it gives me a broader sense of the meta. It's helped me discover more types of decks that I might not have otherwise known about or felt comfortable with. So, and sometimes, you can't find something that you're happy with, and so you just kind of float. But I was wondering what I tend to do is when there's a new meta, I do kind of the cast the net wide and then kind of pick one or two decks to jam a little bit more. And then if I'm prepping something for the podcast, I'll do that. But what's kind of the balance that you guys strike on finding decks and sticking to versus bouncing around?
Well, for me, it's got to be fun, right? I am not one to just go, this is the best deck. I'm going to play this and learn how to do it because it's the best deck. I usually run the opposite direction, right? Paladin was good. I was like, well, can't do Paladin because, that's taken. And similarly with Demon Hunter right now. So, I might try and counter if there's a clear best deck. Sometimes that takes the form of me building my own thing, which is its whole other realm, and that can be very hit or miss, right? In the case of present meta, Blood DK did okay against Demon Hunter, but largely I started having success when I went in sort of other directions, kind of teching, and mostly when I'm picking something, I prefer to sort of look at players. So I've never been one to look at the VS stats or the HS replay stats and dig through those. I always went to Ahira on Twitter or, HS top decks kind of stuff. And so I'm looking at like, what's Jombre up to? What's Bunny doing? Or occasionally Casey, or some of these other deck builders that I know I've tended to like their style. And in the case of most recently, yeah, it was in fact a Jombre deck that I was like, this is great. And that's this Dragon Aviana Druid. But yeah, the fun's got to be there for me, because if I'm not enjoying jamming the deck a whole bunch, then it's not going to be worth it, right? Even if I'm climbing, winning always feels good, but I'm always like, I don't know. I'm doing the same thing every game. Like,
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the same thing for me, in that I'm more likely to find something that is. I like to make sure that I'm not bringing a knife to a gunfight in general, when I'm picking a deck, but I also I will sometimes play the best deck just to learn how it loses. I
mhm.
think that there's some value in that, and that typically doesn't take a whole lot of time. Because when you're starting out with a deck, you're gonna lose with it a bunch, and then you kind of learn how it loses. Because I think one of the things that does happen is some of the top decks, they do get a little bit of mystique around them if you haven't played them, and playing them will kind of teach you at least what you need to be able to do in order to beat them. And then once I've got a decent sense of what the meta is, then I try to figure out what's in common, and then I try to pick something that attacks all those things relatively well. I generally want to at least feel like I have a puncher's chance in every matchup, right? I don't need to be favored in every matchup, but I at least want to feel like I'm going to be playing a game a lot of the time, right? Which is why I played Aggro Demon Hunter for a little bit, and then that was mainly because the games were fast at PAX while I was waiting in line at PAX, and then once I got home, I'm like, I don't really want to do this. They play a taunt and I die. I don't want to do that. Um, so I'll look for kind of what are the kinds of common themes of this meta. Sometimes there aren't any. Sometimes you're in a random nonsense meta and you can't really do that. But a lot of them, in this case, there's a lot of weapon attacks, right? Especially before the nerfs, you had Odin, you had the Paladin lifesteal weapon, you had Umpire's Grasp, whatever. So okay, Quartzite Crusher seems good, right? Then we'll just freeze all of them. We don't have to worry about it, and we can deal with those types of decks, and then kind of branch out from there. But yeah, it does have to be something that I think anything you're going to climb with, if you're going to stick to a deck, it needs to be something that you genuinely enjoy playing, even if it's not top tier. And you can I've said this a lot in terms of just data and statistics. In general, whatever you're looking at statistics on an HS replay or a Vicious Syndicate or whatever, those are representing the average player at those rank brackets. You will not see those immediately because you're going to be new with the deck and you're not going to know what you're doing. But if you stick with the deck and you learn it really well, you can exceed those, right? And I generally say, when I'm telling people how to pick, this comes up a lot when we're talking about conquest lineups, right? And that's when people are really looking at a lot of matchups and just trying to see how they stack up to what they're expecting to see. If you've put in over 100 games on a deck, and 100 might be low for this, but just because it's a round number, if you put in a lot of games on a deck, bump up all those stats by 5%, because you're going to get more win rate just by knowing the deck really well and knowing how to play those matchups than the average player will. Which is why you've seen in some big tournaments, there are players that didn't take a deck that they were really really skilled with and regretted it because the data told them not to. And then you hear this, you've heard this, there's been a few cases of this. And it's because the data doesn't reflect the experience of someone who is uniquely skilled with a deck. It's reflecting the average experience with the deck. So that's something you really need to keep in mind when you're looking at those stats.
Yeah, I think there's the place that the stats hold. So it does help, on the one hand, you don't want to completely ignore the meta when you're picking a deck, right? You have to play the game on the terms of the meta that it's in, especially, if you want to be like me before I was competitive and I'm playing at Platinum and I'm playing random nonsense that I made up, and that's fine because so is everyone else at Platinum who I'm facing. But if you want to be playing at a competitive level, you do need to know kind of what's in the meta, what are relatively refined decks, although that's not always just what's at the top of HSR, the top of VS. But the stats show if a deck has a 40% win rate, then that means not many people are finding success with it. Doesn't necessarily mean you won't, but that most people are not. However, if we did like a factor analysis on the relative input of like strength of this deck and player, and we restricted it to decks that relatively work, I think we would find that player skill and player comfort and player fun, honestly, is a really large part of that. I have certainly had experiences where I'm sitting there playing the best S tier deck and just not winning with it because I'm just not quite clicking with it, and then playing something else that is tier 3, sometimes even tier 4, and maybe really able to make it work. I often gravitate towards the like tier 2 decks and then really learn them well. And then you can play them as a tier 1 deck, even though they're supposedly not that. Just because if you're having fun, you're going to be motivated to learn it more. You're going to be motivated to play more games. And when you do that, you will perform better, as long as the matchup spread that it has is reasonable, right? You're not being completely hard countered by something that's super popular in the meta. Then you're likely to be able to do well. I will also have a caveat. If you don't click with the deck immediately, that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't play it. I like Fire in Rage Warrior, and I think this was pretty common and part of why the deck wasn't more popular. It was kind of deceptively difficult. Like some decks people expect to be difficult, and so they kind of know there's a learning curve to going in. Fire and Rage was like this proactive deck, and aggro's brain dead, right? Everyone knows that. But it was actually a really hard deck to play. And so it could feel like, oh, this deck is just bad, or this deck is just not for me. And maybe the deck was not for you. Maybe you tried it and it's just, you didn't really like the play experience. But I knew from how people were talking about it, I was like, on paper, this deck has everything that I like. It has a really flexible game plan. It's really proactive, but it has a late game plan B. So I just need to really learn how this works. And I watched VODs and I talked to people and was able to get up that curve. And then it ended up being one of my favorite decks of last year. So there is a balance between, if you're not having fun with a deck, then don't force it. But you might want to force it just a little bit just to see, what's the trajectory? Am I not getting any better at all? Then maybe it's not the deck. But if I am getting a little better, then maybe it's worth, if the deck appeals to you enough in other ways, it might be worth trying to get up the learning curve on that deck. Sometimes also, if the deck seems like it completely doesn't work and makes no sense, you might just misunderstand the deck. If you just pick up this Jombe Dragon Druid and you don't think about Zarimi, you're like, why are there 2 dragon tails in this deck?
Or you think about Zarimi and you think Zarimi costs 6 and you're picking expensive dragons instead of cheap ones. Yeah.
Yeah, the deck is completely not working, but it's coming from a source that, where someone did well with this. It should. I also have a note later. So don't cut a card if you have no idea why it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Try to figure out why it's there. It might be that it's there because it's teching for a meta that you're not in, right? Like it's like Speaker Stomper and you're not seeing any nature shamans or something like that. But sometimes if you see a card, you're like, what is this? It's actually important to the deck. And if you don't know why the cards are in there, it's often shows that you don't really know how the deck is supposed to run. And I feel like this meta has a lot of decks where the deck list is not intuitive. You have to spend a little time with the deck list. Or another reason why I kind of like getting decks from the deck creators is that they often explain a little bit of what's the thesis statement of this deck when they give it. And so then that's helpful to understanding what you need to do in order to play this deck, and what you're, the most important thing you need to know is, what is my main game plan? What's my plan A? What's my plan B? And people ask about the mulligan. The mulligan, it's important for that step, but it's also really just like a shortcut for, if I know what my opening turns are supposed to look like, I kind of know how I'm supposed to play this deck.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you two were doing the theory crafting, and someone had given you a rogue deck with everything must go and giants and
Oh, yeah.
gaslight gatekeeper, and you were just like, well, these seem bad. Let me take those out. And like, that's the only functional rogue deck right now. It is a variant of that, right? Where it's, about making a big hand size and then shuffling it in, and then playing a bunch of giants. And like, if you just don't know that's how it works, then yeah, it's not going to go great for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, theory crafting, we also wanted to try something not that, but yeah, that's
Sure.
There's a lot of times where I see, well, I don't understand why this card is in there. Like, no, that's a load bearing card. Like, you can't cut that. Like, this card, because you should be playing the deck a few games before you start, in general, before you start cutting things. Like, even when I picked up like the day one wheel lock with Speaker Stomper, and I knew why Speaker Stomper was there. Like, I knew it was there for something like a Nature Shaman, but I'm like, okay, let me give it a few games. And then once I had a few games where Speaker Stomper literally never left my hand, I'm like, okay, now I can cut this, right? because that's a tech card for just something I'm not seeing. Sometimes, though, there are cards that are better than they look, but you're not using them the right way, or don't really know like what scenarios you should be looking for where those cards are good. And then it's tempting to cut them, and that's when you need to ask some questions. But a lot of it is just like, it's very easy to give up on a deck before you really have given it the time to learn it, which is part of sticking with one deck, right? Like, if you constantly bounce around and you don't give it the time to learn how the different pieces come together, like there's always going to be kind of like a base level game plan, and then there's going to be a lot of nuance and a lot of like, oh, this card is actually good in these other situations that I just haven't seen yet because I've only played 5 games against Demon Hunters, right? But it's going to be good in this other situation that I haven't seen because I haven't played enough games with it. You're not necessarily going to know that, right, until you actually put the time in. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't spend some time figuring out what you want to spend time with, right? Like, if you play a couple games like, I hate this, fine, switch off decks, fine. But like, once you reach a point where you're committing, it's going to help you a lot to really commit to the deck and just climb with it. And if you need to take a break, take a break. If the meta shifted, like if the meta shifts substantially, then it's fine to reevaluate, but you should be doing that with eyes wide open rather than just like, it's very easy to just like blame it on the deck when you're tilted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I would say trying not to make the decision on what deck am I playing when you're in the middle of being tilted. And I say, do as I say and not as I do. I absolutely do that sometimes, especially as somebody who has a full collection. But it doesn't tend to work out as well. I think another thing is to think about, what is the play experience of this deck like for you overall? Like, is this a deck, do you like decks with a lot of randomness? Do you like decks with really varied gameplay? Do you like a deck where you're like, I know what I'm doing every game and I can do it? Do you like decks that are really reactive or really proactive? That can help kind of narrow down. And sometimes you might be sitting there like, okay, usually I like really proactive decks, but I want to branch out and I want to try this Rainbow Decay we talked about last week. Or you might go, I usually sit there and try to play decks that fit the kind of boxes of decks that I know that I like, having played the game long enough to know the kinds of decks that I like and taking a second to think about what did they have in common. But also partly because I'm on this podcast every once in a while, I'm like, all right, this checks none of the boxes. We're going to try it anyway. And then see whether that play experience is actually fun and maybe I had the wrong standards, or just confirms that like this is not the type of deck that I generally like to play. So you can also think about like if there's imminent nerfs to something. Sometimes playing the S tier deck, because it's the S tier deck, like that's the thing that's the tallest blade of grass is the one that's going to be cut most likely. So They have generally not, often they don't nerf things into the ground. Sometimes people think they've nerfed it into the ground and it isn't. Occasionally, I think we could argue about whether Paladin got hit pretty hard. But that is something to keep in mind. If something's like really clearly S tier, probably balance changes are on their way. So whether that's worth it to you is only something that you can really say. In general, I have I have a bullet point here called in defense of net decking. So I do want to say off the bat, I think deck building is really fun. I really admire people who are really good at deck building. I have dipped my toes into it more recently and worked on archetypes where I feel like I already know more about it. So I was building a lot of priests and then I did not build the Zarimi priest that I'm playing now, but at the beginning of the expansion was building various overheal priests and things like that. But I also think there's the perennial complaint, net decking ruins Hearthstone because everyone just plays the best thing and then I can't play my thing. First of all, you just can't play it at Legend. Unless it's good. And there are people who deck build at Legend, at top Legend, at very tippy top Legend. There are people who are making very off-the-wall, offbeat decks. It's just, it's hard to play that competitively. And the people who are doing that are doing it by paying a lot of attention to the meta, right? Mm-hmm. What works well into this meta. But there's also no harm in net decking, right? Your interest in the game might be primarily how to pilot a deck, and that is a lot of skill. It's not like the top Legend is 100% people who took the meta breaker off of the VS report, and that's the only reason that they're there. There's a lot more to it than that. I did definitely improve my rank a lot when I started paying attention to what the meta decks are, but that helps you get a baseline, not bringing a knife to a gunfight type of deck. And it helps give you, when you pay attention to how people built those decks, you learn more about how to build your own decks or how to tweak decks yourself, or just how to learn more new decks that other people have made. But I think the sharing among the community, it's also just one of the most fun things, for me at least, the community watching the process of building these decks, watching the things that people come up with. I would never come up with all the stuff that I'm playing if I didn't have the internet to show it to me.
Yeah, and I think for most people there's less of a place for deck building on ladder, but there is a lot of room for deck tinkering.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot of room with like, can I take the 29th, 30th cards and do something else with them to kind of make this, like I've posted plenty of lists over the course of my time posting Legend deck lists on Twitter, where I changed 2 cards and called it my list, right? Like, because that's just how it works. But like, like once you learn a deck really well, then you can kind of figure, okay, well, this card isn't really doing anything for me. And I'm seeing a lot of this matchup that whoever built the list is not seeing. So how can I make this deck slightly better into that matchup? Obviously, you want to be careful. You want to make sure that you're not making your deck worse against everything else. You want to actually understand what you're playing against and how you beat those things. Like you're not putting in like a steam cleaner when we could have that against Plague Decay necessarily, because it's not going to help you. But, understanding like what kinds of things you could do to make those matchups a little bit better and increase your win rate a little bit. And then you have something that's, you're standing on the shoulders of giants, but you have something that is your own, that you have some leeway to make work. But I mean, ultimately, there are only so many archetypes, and somebody's going to build all of them, and some of them are going to be good and some of them aren't. If there's something that you've come up with that is completely unique, either you have something that nobody's thought about, or somebody's already tried it and determined that it's not going to work for whatever reason, at least right now. There's just like so many people playing the game. Right, there are millions of people playing the game all day, every day. And if somebody stumbles upon something, they're going to play it and probably not keep it to themselves. And then the other people will play it, and then that's where net decking starts.
I mean, we had Hero Power Druid. Like,
yeah.
with actually, I think that was the Geppetto deck that I used to complete the Geppetto thing, right? Was the Hero Power Druid. Now, not the greatest position when people are running Quartzite Crushers and including Glacial Shards because of Demon Hunters. But, it was fun. And I think even if you are not doing the building yourself, there are often a lot of like really cool lists you can just find looking around online. And
Yeah. There's often people playing, things that are like the Hero Power Druid, the Jombre list for Druid. There's a Dragon Drum list that World 8 and Minmon have been playing in the Discord. There's, Enzo in the Discord just always plays Warrior, finds ways to do well with it, and never plays the meta Warrior, just sort of kind of like Edel. If it's the meta Warrior, he's not playing it.
And sometimes he climbs and sometimes he doesn't, and he's okay with that.
That tinkering with that is what he wants to do, and there are communities that are dedicated to that, to tinkering with the deck. And I think, I think there's a lot of value to be had in trying the more unconventional decks or tinkering with decks. You just have to recognize that sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. So that's just part of, I think it's worth giving those decks a try because sometimes they do really work out, or they're just really cool, or you learn things from them. And also, you will occasionally donate MMR because you just don't know how this deck works, or it's just not very well positioned into the meta. And you found that out by playing it, and that is just an inevitable. You can climb back up if you've reached a rank place before and held it for a while. You can get back there again. It might not be. You can't get back there again on command. Is the tricky part, but you can eventually. Once you get in a groove, you will climb back to some place where you've been. You just have to. Sometimes it can get frustrating if you're like, I feel like I should be at this rank, and I feel like I should be able to get there whenever I want. That is path to madness.
As my therapist calls that, shooting all over yourself, and it's a bad thing.
But if you're so afraid of being in that mode that you never take a risk on a deck, I think that can, so some people, they just want to play the Meta Breaker deck. That is what they want to do. If that's what you have fun doing, that's what you have fun doing. I found I've had more fun when I'm willing to lose rank sometime and then know I can climb back up later.
Well, okay, so say you've done your bouncing around, you found what's fun, you picked a deck and and a version. How do you go about tweaking that deck?
So I think generally what I end up doing is I start keeping mental notes of cards that sit in my hand a lot, because those are the ones. Like, I will say again, as the resident data person, it is very tempting to go onto HS Replay and sort everything by choose your stat that sucks. Drawn win rate, played win rate, whichever crappy stat you want to use, because they both suck for different reasons. Whichever one you want to use, people will do that. They'll sort by drawn or played win rate, and they'll say, well, this is the 30th card in the deck. Let's get this out and replace it with something better. There will always be a 30th card in the deck. There's no situation where you're going to do that sorting and not end up with a 30th card in the deck. It doesn't mean that it needs to be cut necessarily, and it doesn't mean that it's even the worst card in the deck. It may mean that it just is very situational, or it's for a matchup that you were seeing a lot of that you're not now, or that the other person is not seeing enough of, but you might be, right? So I don't think that, like, it's very tempting to use data to try to shortcut this, and I don't think it's really the right way to go. I think it's more relying on your intuition as someone who has, as we just said, spent a lot of time with the deck and understand how it's supposed to work. And then you can start looking at cards that, like, would this be better if this was something else? You should know what that is. It's the question is not would this be better if it's anything else? That's a different thing. I mean, I will say that on stream occasionally, but that's more at a tilt than anything else. But, like, you want to have the something else in mind, right? Like, if you're thinking about a card that you would want to put in over that, you should have something in mind for some sort of specific situation. Then you want to think about, like, when I draw this card, what if it were X? Would it be better?
It might start out with just a category, like I need draw, and this draw
Right.
is not working for me. And then you kind of look for what's draw. I need a better 1-drop. I need to be able to do a little better in a certain type of matchup. Although, as we said in our Tech Cards Evergreen episode, you are always going to have bad matchups.
Yes.
Unless you're day 1 Demon Hunter, in which case your bad matchup is the mirror. You will always have bad matchups. So, but there might be something where you say, like, okay, but Demon Hunter is 30% of the meta at my rank bracket or whatever. Is there something that's better? And maybe it's Glacial Shards or something like that. But you should have a category of thing that you feel like you need more of, or a category of thing where you're like, I always have a full hand. Why do I have this many draw cards? A specific type of thing. I do think the card stats can be helpful to some extent. You just have to be careful on how you use them.
I think again, this is my position as a data person. I think most people use them wrong. So, and you really have to know what you're looking for outside of, like, the mulligan stats, which are something very specific, and even those you can misinterpret if you're not careful. So I would rather be thinking about, like, you're not optimizing a deck for the sake of optimizing it. You're optimizing a deck for purposes of trying to improve it in one of several vectors, right? Like, you're trying to improve a particular matchup. You're trying to make it feel less clunky, which is just a catch-all for too slow, runs out of stuff, the mana costs are too high, whatever it is, right? It's clunky somehow. I want to make it less clunky. You should have a goal in mind when you go to tinker with the deck. There's a particular thing that you want to improve, and this is how I think I'm going to do it. And then necessarily that means I need to cut something. But it's very easy to think about, to try to just want to optimize it for the sake of min-maxing, and generally that's where people end up going off a cliff.
And sometimes you'll have an idea. So I had an Overheal deck before the expansion that was different than what ended up being the more commonly played Overheal deck. For a while, I was playing one with, like, Ambient Light Spawn and the Naga that everyone forgot existed that heals 6 to your whole board if you've played a holy spell.
Dreamboat?
Nope.
Oh, no, the other one.
The other one that rotated, that even I have forgotten the name of. So I was playing this, and it was actually doing pretty well for me. And I really wanted to cut Cathedral. It was a little slow. I had only one copy of it. I kept trying to cut it, and every time I cut it, I would run out of stuff. Like, every single time. That was part of why I was sitting there with Priest before this expansion came out, being like, we're going to miss Cathedral a lot, guys. Because every time that I tried to cut my single copy of Cathedral, it didn't work out. So you do need to pay attention to, how does this actually work out when I try to do it? And is my theory about the deck and what the deck needs being held up? And chat is saying Herald of Light. Thank you, Pilot. It was Herald of Light. So in terms of the stats, I don't use the drawn win rate, played win rate that much. With played win rate, you really want to keep in mind. So something like Sif is going to have, like, you don't play Sif unless you're about to win, almost always, right? You don't just tempo your Sif. So now Sif is key to that deck. You're obviously not cutting it anyway, unless, I suppose, you're not building it as a Sif OTK. Sometimes also people, when a deck is new, get really focused in on, like, I have to optimize this one strategy, and it turns out, like, you can just kill them other ways, and that turns out to be the way to build the deck. But played win rate, you have to think about, or maybe a card has a really bad played win rate, but that's because you mostly only play it when you're on the back foot, and it's actually saving you games. It can really depend on the card. I do use the mulligan stats a lot, but don't just look at the mulligan win rate, look at the keep rate.
Yeah.
So if the mulligan win rate is high and the keep rate is low, that could mean that people are underkeeping the card. Or it could mean that people are only keeping the card when they have it with another particular thing, and then it's good. Like Funnel Cake and Clergy are good together in the Zarimi Priest.
Well, and also the way that, at least the way that HS Replay tracks it, is that mulligan win rate is the win rate when that card started in your hand, whether or not you kept it or you got it off the second half of the mulligan. So sometimes you have a card with a high mulligan win rate and a 0% keep rate because nobody keeps it in the mulligan, but it ends up there and then people win despite that, right? This is even more important now that Deck Tracker has mulligan win rate stats on the screen in the mulligan, because I've been seeing a whole bunch of times when it's like 85% win rate, 0 keep rate. Like, no, that's not it. That is not it. Like, there's a lot that it's better than it used to be, their mulligan win rate, but there's also just like a lot of things that go into what makes a good mulligan card, and it's they haven't really put in a lot of that additional logic to account for all the different factors and give you that kind of visibility into whether you should be keeping something in the mulligan. But generally, high win rate, low keep rate means that it just ended up there and people won anyway.
Yeah, I pay at least as much attention to the keep rate when looking at that as I do to the win rate. And sometimes, again, it turns into well, you have to think about it, which I know is a little bit frustrating sometimes as the advice, like, well, it depends. Like when a student says, so how do I do a proof in geometry? And it's like, well, there isn't an algorithm to follow for this. I'm sorry. Here's some tips. So that's what we're trying to give you. I do have a note here that says, if all this is very annoying to you, just queue into better matchups. And that is your official Megasa advice for this podcast. Just queue into better matchups.
Just get good.
Yeah, just get good. Just draw better. The tiny grain of truth is, if you're queuing into bad matchups constantly, maybe you're not super well positioned into the meta.
If you're queuing into bad matchups, you also might be tilted. If every matchup is a bad matchup, you might be tilted. That's also possible.
And also, luck is streaky, right? Just because you ran into 3 of this deck in a row does not necessarily mean that everyone in the world is now playing this deck. And it is the only thing you will ever see from now on. But yes, I have found if I'm losing a lot and I don't know why I'm losing, I should stop playing. And my partner will be like, so why'd you lose that game? Not to try to needle me, but to try to find out whether I'm tilted. Because if I'm not tilted, I might be able to be like, well, I think they just got me because they, got their shopper on 3 and I didn't have my glacial shard. And, or I might just be like, I don't know. This is all BS. I just didn't draw anything that I needed ever. Okay. You should maybe stop. You should go play some Book of Hours. It's very chill. I suppose we've mentioned some things, but just really briefly in terms of the answer of where do I look? Obviously, there's lots of places to look. There's ones that I think are really well-known, like HS Replay, like Vicious Syndicate, and I definitely do get decks from there sometimes. On the HS Replay, I like to look at the similar decks to see like what are the cards that people are tweaking and what are the cards that people are not tweaking. There's also donkey.top, D0NKEY.top has a lot of streamer decks. If you're like, oh, I heard the streamer is playing something and I don't know where, I can't find it on their Twitter. I don't know what it is. That's a good place to do it. It's also has a lot of, in a new meta, I tend to find more things there quicker, and you don't have to have premium for that site, which is awesome. It has card stats and a bunch of stuff, so that's a great resource. Twitter is a major place where streamers will post their decks, deck builders. We try to give some decks here, although if we just gave all the meta decks as our podcast, that would be our podcast every week. That is the Vicious Syndicate podcast every week. So it's not our podcast, but we do try to give a sense of what some of the decks are. And there's in our Discord, and there's other Discords as well. We have a deck list library. We have a deck forum. You can just ask, what's the list for this?
I will say sourcing the list from Twitter is high risk, high reward.
You do want to pay attention to who posted it.
Well, you want to pay attention to who posted it, but it's also like there are times when it's not necessarily bait, but it also might just be something that is really only going to work for that particular player. I'm thinking about like, like any of John Bray's Masked Reveler decks. I'm thinking about like CJ Haka playing Naga Mage, right? Like that, and that wasn't just him, but it was mostly him. And but like you want to look at generally what I do to determine if a deck is real or not. Sometimes I'll try it if I'm feeling like it makes sense to me and I want to try it and it looks fun. Knowing that I am taking my MMR in my hands when I do that and going into that like eyes wide open. But also if you start seeing other players refining the deck and then reposting it, that's when it's probably a better chance that it's real, right? Because that means that it's working for somebody other than just the person who posted it. And that's a good sign as far as, is this something that I should invest some time in? Also, generally, the refined versions are like a little bit better. That might give you a bit of a better chance than like the raw first version of the deck.
So, like when M. Drugi posted his Ragnaros Nature Shaman, and then Clark was like, "What if we took this out and added in Jazz Base?"
I mean, if Clark posted, "Oh, I took out Jazz Base and then I went 27-0 to top 10 Legend, and it's the best deck ever." I mean, he's gonna say it's the best deck ever, regardless. But it's it's generally like is somebody posting it like not just like, oh, what if we try stuff, but actually like, oh, I tried this and actually this is nuts. So play this and this deck is really good and I just changed these 2 cards or whatever. That's a good sign. Some people will just, and some people will just like try those things because they think they're cool and they think they can make them a little bit better. And if they do and they have good results with it, one could be a fluke, multiple people is probably a trend.
And you may know if you try enough decks from a particular person whether you tend to click with the types of things that they post, or maybe they're known. If I'm looking for a hunter deck, I'll often go see what CDC's doing, for example, and because I know that he spends all of his time thinking about how to optimize hunter. He may, not every list that he does is going to be something that I find success with, but when you get a better sense, and if you listen to the podcast, you'll hear us mention people, and you can start to get a sense of who people are in the community, and when you try their decks, whether they tend to work for you or not. But that's a great tip about when people are refining a deck, when you're running into it on ladder, then that's something that's more likely to not be a knife in the fight.
Yeah. Like if Zetalot posts a priest deck, you probably don't want to play that. If somebody else posts a Zetalot priest deck and they said, I changed these 2 cards and this works, then you can go ahead. But like they're like Zetalot is just like, he's so far beyond everybody else on priest that he just gets things to work because he knows the deck, the class so intimately that he just gets things to work. That I've tried and we've all experimented, right? And like it never goes well. I've tried his decks and it's just like, I know he knows why these things are in here and I super do not.
Yeah, it also depends. When you look at the deck, do you understand the deck? Like,
yeah,
maybe it works and you just don't understand it, or maybe it doesn't quite work. So, and do people, when they're changing the 2 cards, do they have a rationale that makes sense? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll be a really weird seeming choice. Someone's like, I took this deck and I added in these 2 cards that you forgot existed. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad idea. Sometimes a card that people have written off. I think a lot of cards get written off that maybe actually have a role. So I wouldn't discount a card just because you don't remember what it is off the top of your head. But you do want to see the rationale for including the card or cutting the card. And then try not to get too much functional fixedness on how you're playing the cards. Like Zarimi, if Zarimi's active and you can just like completely swing a board, even though you can't kill him, just play it. It's fine.
I did that tonight. I used Zarimi for a board clear against the Demon Hunter. Worked great. Won that game. Works great.
So sometimes think you know what this card is for. Is there any other situation where it might be good? And that's one thing I learned from watching tournaments, actually. you watch the best players in the world, they know how the card is supposed to be used, and they also know all the other ways you could use the card and when to, like, they think about all the other ways that maybe you should use it, and then they play the card in the supposedly suboptimal way that actually is the best play they had that turn in that particular matchup. So that's just a plug for the Masters Tour, I guess, is that's the kind of thing that watching that kind of player, I think, really helps you start to learn a little bit. But I think we've covered this pretty well. Is there any parting thoughts?
No, I think that'll about do it.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, everyone, have fun choosing decks and jamming them. And also, I guess the last thing that I would say is if I recommend a priest deck, wait and see if anyone else also recommends that deck.
So, same for me, probably. Yeah.
Well, we have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website at Concede.com, where you can also find our contact info, our show notes, and our Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show at patreon.com/CoinConcede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at twitch.coinconcede.com. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com. And write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at CoinConcede, as well as like, share, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/CoinConcede. If you'd like some CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Kresh, Beef Squatch, David P., Walu, Jeremy T., Bottlecaps, Crumpy Monk, The Burger Club, Kirk Regan, Forgiven One, Grizzly Bear, The Grand Arcanum, and Tyler Knight. Coin Concedes.
I will coin concede. We had a number of people in the Discord who were posting, and for any listeners as well who got 11x for the first time, so congratulations. That's always really exciting. And thank you also to Contig, who just subbed at tier 1. Thank you. So yeah, congrats to everyone climbing and reaching milestones. Coin concede to the BG's team for getting duos out. I'm really excited for that, even as someone who's not really a BG's player. And also coin concede to Jombe for making 2 crazy decks that I played this week that like worked. These were decks I went in expecting to donate MMR by playing them, and actually did not. So that was
always nice when it works out that way.
Yes. Bank error in your favor in that case, yeah. Well, I'm going to coin concede to the kids who are all involved in the school play this weekend. So they've all been out until like 10:30 every night. So Maureen and I have watched a lot of Jersey Shore this week because they haven't been around. So not that we watch it because they're not around. It's just like they laugh at us when they see us, when they come in and see us watching it. So, you know, that's more of why. But yeah, so I'm sure that they're going to do great, though. It's been a bit of an adventure because they had school was closed because of a plumbing issue, and they've apparently had some of the sets have been needing some work or whatever. I mean, they have these kinds of like dramatic things before every production, and it all turns out fine. So I'm sure it's going to be fine. But they've been working really hard this week, so it's been very quiet in the house until they get home, and then it's very, very loud.
Well, honestly, coin concede to Tyler Knife. We did a coaching recently. It was the first time I got to coach with them, and it was a really pleasant experience. And yeah, I just, it's always nice to meet new folks as we get supporters on Patreon and do coachings and things. And yeah, I had a great time.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us for this week. So until next time, keep calm and just queue into better matchups. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
All life must end. I yield for now. I concede. Well fought. I concede.
You win this one.
The victory is yours.
You have bested me.
I give up.
You win this one, friend. time. I choose death.